Ahoy, you salty sea dogs. It's your boy Stingray, welcoming you once more again to my Art Cove. Only today, we're going to be talking less about comic art and more about comic books, the source of all of that art that we covet so much. And in particular, I wanted to talk to you guys today about indie comics. Something a little bit new, a little bit different. I wanted to ask you all a couple of questions. Do you ever feel like you're just tired of reading the adventures of the same characters over and over again, the same characters that you've been reading for the last 30 plus years maybe? Are you tired of the big publishers just taking elements of certain characters and their stories and putting them through a blender and seeing what comes out the other side and repackaging it as all new, all different, ultimate, or absolute? I know I am. And I found that the answer to that is indie comics. In the last year or so, I started to dive more into, let's call it the deep end of indie comics. And that included going to IC3 this year and watching the creation of new indie comics collectives like Power Pulp comics, which we'll talk about a little later. And just, really broadening the horizons of what I, as a comics reader, take in. Now, I still love superhero books. I still love the big publishers. I've always been more of a Marvel guy, but I enjoy Marvel comics. I enjoy DC comics, but I've been reading comics for over 30 years now. And I feel like the big publishers tend to just be on a big cycle. It's just one big circle, and it's gotten to the point where I've read enough comics over time that I can kind of see the phases. I can see the spokes in the great wheel in the sky. I recognize the patterns, I've seen a lot of the stuff that's going on in comics today. I've seen it happen before, and I'm sure we'll see it happen again. And so I am left wanting something that is fresh and new and exciting, and maybe something that is a little bit unrestricted by editorial oversight or by being owned by family-friendly corporations and that kind of thing. And indie comics seems to be the place to be for all of that stuff. You have comics that focus more on characters and stories rather than concerning themselves with being IP. You have passionate creators that know that they're not going to become millionaires making these comics, but they do it because it's a passion for them. They have that demon in them, and the act of creating comics is their way of trying to exercise those demons. And personally, I find that exciting, and I find that really interesting. And, not all indie comics are the best thing ever, but at the very least, they're new and they're different. And in a lot of cases, I'll take that over the same old retreaded bullshit that we get from Marvel and DC any day of the week. Now, that begs the question, what is an indie comic? And before I started filming, I decided to ask Google what it thinks. And the AI tells me indie comics, short for independent comics, in case you were wondering, are comics, books, and graphic novels produced outside of the major publishers like Marvel and DC. They are known for creative freedom, diverse storytelling, and the creators usually retaining ownership of their intellectual property. If we just go off of this definition, it sounds like anything that is published away from Marvel or DC is an indie comic. That means Image, Dark Horse, all of that stuff. And all of the small publishers or the self-published folks definitely fall into that category. But I would argue that an element of being an indie comic, to me at least, is not being a part of the mainstream. And as far as I'm concerned, there are definitely a few books, like from Image or even Dark Horse, not many, mind you, but a few that have definitely become mainstream. So maybe things like The Walking Dead, I think maybe was an indie book when it first started. But now that it is an IP that has had a long-running comic, as well as 2 successful TV shows and multiple video game adaptations, I think it's hard to call that indie. Invincible, which is another Robert Kirkman joint, is now a wildly popular animated TV show on Amazon Prime. Is that indie? I don't know. Kirkman and Otley are revisiting a couple of the characters from the Invincible universe, right? They've got a Battle Beast miniseries that's coming out right now, and then there's another miniseries featuring some of the other hero characters from Invincible coming out soon called Capes, I think is the title. If you put out sequel comics or spin-off comics to your original property that you have to label and let people know it's part of a universe, I feel like maybe you've moved beyond the confines of being independent at that point. I mean, you're independent as far as like you're not part of Marvel and DC, but you're still, I'd still say you're within the realm of the Hollywood system equivalent of comics, right? And even one last example to me would be Hellboy. Hellboy is a Dark Horse book, and it's completely owned by Mike Mignola. But at this point, there's been animated films. There's been 4 different live action films, some way better than others. And I think there's even been maybe at least 1 or 2 video game adaptations as well. And there's action figures, the whole line, right? You can buy Hellboy merch, stuff that you can go into toy stores and buy. You can go into big name shops and buy this stuff. So I would argue that Hellboy maybe has entered the mainstream, and where he may have been independent at one point, I would say I don't think he really constitutes any longer. And the whole point I'm trying to make here is how I define indie, or how I would like to try to define indie. But I think that that's a conversation, right? I think that the definition is a little bit nebulous, and it's something that I want to explore. And I'm going to be doing that because this video is meant to be the first in a series where I am going to explore the indie depths. That's the clever little water-related title that I came up with. And my goal primarily is to talk to you all about indie comics that I'm reading, not so much to review them. I don't want it to be a typical review show where I am applying point values or percentages or star ratings to comics that I've read. I don't want to do that. I'm not going to try to convince you all what books you should read or shouldn't read, or, tell you stay away from that. I thought it was crappy. I'm not the be all end all of good taste here. I like to think I have pretty good taste, and I have quite varied interests, but I'm not going to assume that just because I do or don't like something that you will or won't like it as well. So my goal is to speak to indie comics, not so much to review them, but just to bring a general awareness to the existence of these indie books. And I also want to talk about where you can find indie comics, where you can find the creators that make indie comics, and just maybe talk about news in the indie comic space to help bring a broader awareness to the indie comic scene. And I think that if anybody out there who's watching these videos ends up going out and picking up an indie comic that they may have never even heard of before, just to give it a try, I would consider this video series to be a success. And so that's where I'm at with that. Now, speaking of indie news, there was a bit of indie news that came out this week from our friends at CAF. And I wanted to touch on that. Earlier this week, Comic Art Fans announced that their independent comic show, IC3, which is the Indie Creators Comic Con, is going national. And they're going to have 5 annual shows that are going to be launching in 2026, with up to 6 more by the end of the next year. That's pretty wild, because IC3 has only had 2 shows so far. It started in 2024, they had one in 2025, and now in 2026 there's going to be 5 shows with up to 6 more throughout the year. And I heard from Kazra, the CEO of CAF, that at some point he wants to have 12 separate IC3 shows per year. So IC3, like I said, it's the Indie Creators Comic Con. It is a comic show put together for indie creators to show off the amazing things that they're doing. And I actually got to go to the IC3 that was held this year in New Haven, Connecticut, all the way back in March. And it was a lot of fun. I saw a lot of comics that I had never heard of before, a lot of really interesting ideas and experimental stuff. I bought a small comic that was cut out into the shape of a fish and tucked into a folded up piece of newspaper, and that's how they sold it. It was really intriguing, and there was no way I was going to be able to walk past that table without buying that little fish comic. And it was a fun comic, and that's the kind of thing that I like to see that is actually innovative and cool. What was even better about IC3 is I got to walk up to creators and say, hey, this looks really interesting. Tell me about your comic. And I made lots of connections with awesome indie people at the show. It was a lot of fun. There was a drink and draw the Friday night of the show. It's a one-day show, so all day Saturday I spent going to see as much as I could. And let me tell you, for a one-day show, there was a lot going on. I think the final count was like 73, 75 different creators, somewhere in that region. There's a lot of people there, and they were in a fairly small space, and it was still hard to get around and see everything, because everywhere I went, I saw something really cool. I met somebody that I really wanted to talk to and engage with to try to learn about the comics that they were putting out, the projects that they were working on. And it was really awesome. And I had a great time there. I came home with a stack like this tall of indie comics. I ended up getting 4 commissions from some of the artists there, which are some of the best commissions that I got this year. And it was just a really fun time. And so now that IC3 is expanding and they're going to have up to 12 shows in a year all over the country, like, that's crazy. And I'm wondering, how many IC3 shows can I get to in a year? In the announcement here, they talked about the first 3 definite on the calendar IC3 shows that are happening in 2026. The first one is going to be IC3 at OAX. I assume most of the people that watch my videos know what OAX is, but for those of you who may not, OAX is the Original Art Expo, which is held every year now in sunny Orlando, Florida. In 2026, it's going to be in February. And now IC3 is going to be represented at OAX. If you go to the OAX website, which is oaxpo.art, you can go through a little drop down at the top and filter by some of the subcategories of art that are going to be at OAX. And one of them is IC3. So you can see all of the cool indie creators that are going to be at OAX. Now, I know a couple of them off the top of my head. Sean Watkins from Athenium Comic Art is going to be tabling there to show off some of the fine art from some of the artists that he represents, including 2 OAX guests, Matt Allison and Caroline Cash. Amazing indie creators. You know, they do the whole thing themselves. Folks that are self-published and know all about the indie world. It's going to be awesome to see them at the show, and there's plenty of other independent creators that are going to be there as well. Now, the second show that we know is going to be scheduled for next year for IC3 is going to be a co-production in Jacksonville, Florida on July 11th, 2026. It's going to be FC3 and IC3 together. And FC3 is the First Coast Comics Con. So this is going to be a co-promoted show down there in Jacksonville. It says there's going to be over 100 artists and 100 exhibitors with greater than 4,000 people expected to attend. It sounds like it's going to be a pretty hopping show. That one's in July. Heroes is in June. So I don't have any plans in July. I might be able to try to make it down there. We'll see. But then the big news. For the last 2 years, IC3 has been at a location in New Haven, Connecticut. And I know this year it was in March. I'm not sure when it was last year. I didn't go last year. But in 2026, the new, and this is like the official like main IC3 show, the mothership, if you will. It is going to be held on September 26th in Providence, Rhode Island. They found a really cool venue up there that is supposed to be bigger, better, for everybody, food closer by. It's right next to the airport. It sounds like it's going to be pretty awesome, and I can't wait to learn more about the show. I can't wait to hear more, and I'm already looking forward to going to Providence, a city I've never been to before, to go to the next main IC3 show. I'm really excited about that. So another thing that came out of the press release is that IC3 has also put in place national partnerships and co-promotion agreements with some of the best and most innovative people in the comics industry. Collectively, they cover creator, intellectual property, and product protection, multiple types of artist representation groups, community-based comic convention promotion, novel and curated indie comic distribution, and grassroots indie publishing. That's a lot of stuff, but when you see the list of partners that they have, you can see that they're going hard on this. So first we have the artist bullpen, who reps comic artists like Jesse Lonergan, Tommy Lee Edwards, Vanessa Del Rey, and Kayla Valerio. I know Morgan Beam is with them as well, and Jared Cullum. So just a great group of artists being represented by Artist Bullpen. Friend of the Cove, Sean Watkins from Athenium Comic Art, is also teaming up with IC3, and we know that he represents awesome artists like Carolyn Cash, Matt Allison, Nate Powell, and a whole host of others. Cosmic Lion Productions, which was created by Eli Schwab. It's an independent publishing company, art rep, and ideal house. They publish over 50 books since it started and a little more than 5 years ago, and they champion creators from all over the globe, and they find individuals with singular creative ideas that can bring those to the comic-loving readers. They do sci-fi, they do all-ages horror, they do spy-fi, action, adventure, and they even have a manga line. So Cosmic Lion is just a really great collection of indie creators that kind of work together to put out their comics. And you can go check out a lot of those at Cosmic Lion Productions website. There's also C3, the Creative Contract Consulting, which is run by Gamal Hennessy. I know that he is CAF's official, like, big-time lawyer. And I didn't know that he had his own company, but C3, the Creative Contract Consulting, is a company that is meant to help independent creators and publishers protect their rights and revenue. That sounds like a really useful thing for indie creators who don't have the backing of large companies to support the legal rights of their works. So kudos to Kamal for seeing a need and help filling that gap. There's the aforementioned First Coast Comic Con, which is a community-run show group in Florida. There's also TD Art, which is the art rep Tatiana Dykes, who is also an employee of CAF. She's the event coordinator for them, and she has been repping artists for over 25 years now. I know she's got a lot of more illustrative type folks, people like Nir Levy and Jeremy Wilson work with her, and she's been in the business for a long time. She knows what's up, and so I think it's a no-brainer for them to have one of their own who is also an art rep who's been around for a while to team up with the IC3 crew, because some of her people are independent creators. And the last partner in the list is Power Pulp. Now, Power Pulp Comics is a relatively new entity. It's been around for just a few months. I'm going to read the thing here because I think it's important and it's really interesting. So Power Pulp is a creator-first comics collective reimagining how independent books reach the shelves. Acting as a curated distributor, not a publisher, we connect self-published creators with comic shops through a smarter, more equitable model. Each title remains fully creator-owned. We may look like a publisher, but we're something else entirely. A collective force built to uplift original voices and bring boundary-pushing work to a wider audience. This is comics without compromise. Accessible, independent, unapologetically fun. Now, the reason that I want you guys to understand what Power Pulp is because we're going to take a look at some Power Pulp comics now. Like I said, my goal for this video series going forward is to look at some indie comics that I've already read, that I've been reading. I want to talk to you about them and tell you what my thoughts were on them. But today, we're going to look at some unread comics because I figured the best way to break you guys in for this new direction was to do something familiar. And in this case, we're going to do an unboxing.
What's in the box?
It's just not art, it's comic. I actually won these. You see, Power Pulp teamed up with the good folks at the How'd We Get Here podcast. They did the Power Pulp Founding Fathers Contest. You see, Power Pulp was founded by 4 gentlemen: Chris Anderson, Jamie Jones, and the brothers, John and James Coates. And so the idea with the contest was you had to go comment on a YouTube video, and then your name was put into a hat or on a wheel, whatever. And if your name was drawn, you got to pick one comic off of the Power Pulp site per each of the 4 founders, and you got sent those comics for free. And I entered the contest, and my name was drawn. I swear it wasn't rigged, but you know, I think there was only 12 people that entered the contest, so I feel like my odds were pretty good, you know. So, but yeah, I won some comics, and I'm excited because you know, I get to read more indie comics and I get to tell you guys more about them. So let's go ahead and try to get this box open without killing myself. And we'll take a look at some Power Pulp books. Now, I had placed an order with Power Pulp earlier in the year. So this isn't my first Power Pulp box of comics, but it's a freebie, so I can't be too mad at that. And at first off, we got a nice Power Pulp bookmark. We love swag. Oh yeah. This is cool. So this is a little letter that they send out that you can take to your local comic shop. O mighty and benevolent purveyor of sacred texts and awesome art, let it be known that I, your devoted customer, wish to buy heaps of comics from Power Pulp. Please procure a glorious stack of material for me and my fellow readers. The humble folks at Power Pulp will reward your wisdom with a righteous wholesale price of 50% off. Join the movement and supply me with the pulpy goodness that I desire. Register and order at powerpulpcomics.com. And then at the bottom it has instructions. Please give this to your local comic shop, indie bookstore, or any other cool place that love comics. So that's pretty cool. If you guys ever order something from Power Pulp and you get one of those, feel free to take it to your local comic shop. Now, let's get into the books. So right off the bat, we have Spectral by Chris Anderson and David Acampo. This is a trade paperback, actually. This is a horror anthology, a showcase of fear. And it's based around, I think each horror story is centered around a particular color, if I remember correctly. So spectral, like spectrum, you know. I'm looking forward to reading this. I have read, so Chris Anderson is a really cool guy. He's part of the Stingray Squad, hashtag. He has done a number of bootleg Masters of the Universe comics, and I got one from him at IC3 this year called Voyeur, which is about, and of course I can't think of the character's name now. It's the guy with the big red head and the ears and the bug eyes that come out on stalks. I cannot think of his name right now, but that character, Voyeur, is the unofficial origin story of that character, and it is weird and kind of fucked up in a really wild and fun way. I wasn't ready. I thought I knew what a bootleg He-Man and Masters of the Universe comic was going to be, and I was not. But it was a lot of fun, and it was something that only an indie comic could do. So yeah, I very much look forward to reading this horror collection from Chris Anderson. Now, holy shit. So this one is interesting. So this is Dino Beasts #2, and this is by the Coates brothers, John and James. I've read Dino Beasts #1. Actually, Dino Beasts #1 was one of my picks from the Coates brothers, but it was sold out, so they don't have any more physical copies of this. So by way of making up for that, they actually sent me the first issue in PDF form, and I got to read it digitally. I didn't know that the Dino Beast books were this big. This is pretty chunky. I know the first issue is like 88 pages. This one I think is like around 90, if I remember correctly. It's a big book. That's a hefty boy. And I mean, the art is just, is crazy. Like, let me find a good, see if I can find a like good spread here. Like, look at this. You get all kinds of really great dino fighting action. Like when I got done reading this book, the first issue of this book, what came to my mind was, you know, I grew up in the 80s. I, grew up watching He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Back to that. And I was a huge dinosaur lover. I had books about dinosaurs. I knew all the names of all the different species, and I knew what, set them apart and all of that stuff, at least as we understood them in the 80s, right? And I would say that for anybody who is probably similar in age to me and grew up loving dinosaurs and He-Man, you're going to love this book. It is slightly over the top, fun, barbarian type action. Like, I think if you like Conan and you like dinosaurs, you'll probably dig this. It's kind of sword and sandal. It feels familiar because it's, like I said, it's kind of like Conan, but all the characters are like anthropomorphic dinosaur people. A lot of fun. I can't wait to dig into #2. I know #3 is out, and #4 I think will be out sometime in the near future, but I'm not sure. And what's interesting is each one, this is already pretty thick. Each one ups the page count by like 5 or 10 pages. So they get progressively bigger. Now, since there are 2 Coates brothers, I got to pick 2 books, one for each, even though both of them are Coates Brothers books, you know, so they're interchangeable. This one, the Coates Brothers present Ninja 4 Dark Vengeance. I don't know the whole story behind this book, and I'd like to find out more, because on the back we have a quote. Ninja 4 Dark Vengeance is a near-perfect embodiment of the true spirit of the ninja movies produced by the legendary Cannon Film Company in the 1980s. Sam Furstenberg, director, Ninja 3, Revenge of the Ninja, and American Ninja 1 and 2. So is Ninja 4 a sequel to those movies? I don't know. I'll have to find out. But this one looked really intriguing, and the guys at the How Do We Get Here podcast said that this one was really good to read. I mean, look at that page. Or look at these 2 pages, but especially the splash here. Look at that. I think I'm in for some hardcore. Oh, wow. Dude, look at the page here with the koi. I think I'm in for some hardcore 80s ninja goodness, and that excites me in a way I wasn't expecting. I am a big fan of the 80s, so. And last but not least, oh yeah, this one, I'm gonna go ahead and take the plastic off of this because I wanna get a good look at it. This is cool because this one is actually a hardcover. There we go. Look at the size of that one. That's a nice, sturdy little hardcover. This is like the same size as like some of the smaller, oh, this is number 2. Oh well. Well, looking at the site, I couldn't tell which order these went in, but this is The Baboon and the Temple of Eternal Life by Jamie Jones. Now, if you're thinking that Jamie Jones is a familiar name, where have I heard that before? Well, Jamie Jones did a Stingray commission for me last year, and I actually framed it in my last video. So go check that out if you want to see some more of Jamie's work and you want to know how I frame art. But in the meantime, the Baboon is a character that Jamie created to be kind of like a pulp action hero. Jamie's a big fan of things from a lost time, the 1920s and 30s. He's very big on like pulp comics and pulp characters, you know, like Doc Savage and that kind of thing. And the Baboon is kind of an homage to those types of characters. He's an international man of mystery type character who travels the world and does some spy stuff. Now, there's 2 Baboon hardcover collections like this currently. I wasn't sure looking at the Power Pulp site which one was volume 1, but this one has a big 2 on the spine here, so now I know. But you don't necessarily need to read them in any particular order. They're all kind of standalone adventures. So I can't wait to dive into this one and check it out. And I will at some point have to go back and pick up the other collection. Oh yeah, this is some of that really nice kind of Eisner school art that Jamie does so well. Yeah, like very, very pulpy and adventure looking. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this. And if you guys want to check out some Power Pulp comics for yourself, go to powerpulpcomics.com and check it out. And I will have to read through these and I'll report back to you my thoughts in a future video. Well, that's all I have for today. And I hope that maybe I piqued your interest at least a little bit, and hope that you all are willing to come with me on this journey into indie comics. I'm going to be reading a lot of comics, and I can't wait to talk to you more about those in the future. Have a great one. I'll see you the next time.